How a kid from Australia finished advising top leaders in the world.
In the last 350 years, the number of times the government or a industry has been successfully able to stop technology from disrupting society is zero.
What is the major changes that we do need to prepare, and where do we need to think faster or be faster with?
So we've never had a technology that is going to be that impactful in the world. You know, I'm not the only one to have said this, but Eric Schmidt and others talk about this being the single most impactful technology on human society in the last 1,000 years.
How big is this risk of, am I going to lose my job in the next 1 or 2 years' time? And what I should be doing now if that risk exists? Welcome to another episode of Extraordinary Leadership Podcast. My name is Dagmar Asperg. I am founder of Extraordinary Leadership and transformational executive coach and partner to leaders who are building extraordinary organizations, businesses, legacies, and lives. In today's episode, we are going to talk about something so relevant for all leaders, and especially how to lead and how to succeed in this exponential era, pretty much driven by AI, in a very fast, rapidly changing world. In the episode, I have in the podcast studio here with me a special guest, someone who not only think about the future, but actually advise on it, shape it, who has been ranked as top number 7 futurist in the world, and who has been advising top leaders, people from administration of President Obama or UAE ministers. And someone who has been at the forefront of banking, technology, and AI, and is called a king of disruption. And I know he's going to take us today on a journey, so I'm so much excited to actually start this conversation. Brett, welcome to Extraordinary Leadership Podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. It's always a challenge to sit on the other side of the chair because I'm recording generally 2 or 3 podcasts a week for my own channel. But I have to remember that I'm here as a guest.
Yeah, you are in a different seat now. You can relax.
Exactly.
And you can take us on a journey. So
absolutely,
that's fun
I will.
as well.
I'd be happy to.
Exactly. So let's start this journey with this question, Brett. How a kid from Australia finished advising top leaders in the world?
That's a good question. It's a process, obviously, but it started with me discovering something fairly early in my career, which was I was a coder, a byte ripper, as they say. It's funny, I said that at one podcast, and they translated it as I was a rapper, and I'm like, no, not a coder, you know. But I started as a coder and then got more involved in architecture. But what I found, which has become sort of central to my career, is that I was very good at communicating highly complex technical issues to business people in a way they could understand. Mm-hmm. And that sort of defined my career. And also have very high order logical reasoning and problem solving skills. So the combination of those two things led to me getting involved in a lot of sort of forward looking situations in terms of thinking about architecture, thinking about organization structure, technology, skills investment, all of those things, particularly during the era of the .com. Then that sort of transformed into my writing career. I leveraged off the writing career to build a startup. So I was able to show that as a technical person, I'm able to build businesses as well, even though I'd been an entrepreneur most of my career. And that led to sort of broader industry credibility, particularly in banking and finance. But my real love was, I'm sort of a frustrated science fiction author. My real love was talking about the impact of technology on society. And so I started to write more and more about that. Obviously, a lot of work in the banking and payments and finance lens. But in 2015, I wrote a book called Augmented, Life in the Smart Lane. It was a top 10 nonfiction book in, nonfiction book in North America that ended up getting onto the desk of President Xi, which was pretty cool. But since then, I've really focused on how technology can help society and help us as a species. That's sort of my big picture goals now.
Amazing. So I'm hearing about this mind that puts complexity to simplicity, always, of course, problem solving and logical reasoning and so on, and curiosity, right?
Yeah, you have to be curious. To be a futurist, I think that's really a key element. Actually, one of my futurist friends, JP Rangaswamy, he put it a little differently. He said you have to be a good pastist as well. You have to understand the past. Mm-hmm. And I think that's good because, you can look at, as a futurist, the core discipline is what we call super forecasting. So long-term, long-range forecasts and applying trending analytics and, development curves and all of those things to that from a data perspective. But you also have to factor in the human factor, how humans respond to change, and we have very good historical precedents for that. So that's where you need to understand the past and what's happened in the past, even though what we're experiencing today is really unlike any other period of history, particularly with AI. But there are analogies, the Industrial Revolution and, changes in employment patterns and things like that is just going to be happening in a much more compressed time frame, I guess.
So let's talk about those patterns, because that's a curiosity question from my side, right? Because there has been a lot of shifts and that one is massive. But also at the same time, you mentioned about this, there will be some patterns in how people adapt to change. So what have you seen in the past that might serve us actually to embrace that change?
Well, there's one sort of overarching statistic that I use, which sort of frames the conversation. Because when you look at technological development over the last 300 years, and let's take the steam engine, electricity, combustion engine, the production line, compute, nuclear energy, space travel, all of these major things that have happened, most of our technological framing in terms of development, we say over the last 350 years. And in the last 350 years, the number of times the government or a industry has been successfully able to stop technology from disrupting society is zero.
Interesting.
Right? So you have a lot of people, for example, talking about artificial intelligence right now. Mm-hmm. And the same was true of social media when it happened. The same was true of mobile phones when they came out. And people were saying, we don't know if this is going to be a good thing for society, whether we should actually have this. Should we have AI? And that is always the wrong question when it comes to technological change, because technological change is inevitable. Mm-hmm. And so therefore you need to start thinking more about how technology is going to impact society and putting guardrails in place and preparing. And we're very bad at that as a species, right? So right now, for example, people are saying, well, I don't know whether we should have AI. Should it be regulated? Is AGI real? Are machines ever going to be conscious? All of those things are the wrong questions. Right? Because the reality is the amount of money that's being invested into artificial intelligence today means that the capitalist market on a global basis is pushing us towards this inevitability. So asking whether it's right or wrong, is sort of really useless. It is happening. It's happening as we speak.
But without you, right?
So then the question is, how do we integrate artificial intelligence or non-human intelligence into society in an ordered fashion that's not too disruptive? How do we guarantee that AI isn't going to disrupt employment? All of those things, that does take foresight and a different sort of planning than we tend to use as humans today.
Interesting what you said, that it landed by me when you said the number of times we try to slow down the technological advancement was zero. And yet we still each time in every change, the beginning of resistance, right?
Yes.
Is this questioning, okay, is it calm? Maybe not. And it will affect me. It's a human nature, right? Because change, doing something different that we have been used to is a threat to our system, right? From psychology to human being, right?
I mean, you can see a big proponent of next generation energy investments, right? Because I think the demands of artificial intelligence is going to create massive energy demand. And you can see that China has responded very well to this, for example. They've deployed about 800 gigawatts of solar just the last 2 years. That's about almost 4 times what the US has deployed in its entire history, and they've just done it in the last 2 years. They're getting ready for an autonomous society and the energy demands that come into that. The problem is when you start talking about the need to develop next generation energy systems to support artificial intelligence and data centers and compute, you get into this argument about climate change and fossil fuels and things like this, when the reality is that the reason China is going to have a big strategic advantage over the United States in autonomy at an economy level is because of their investment in next generation energy infrastructure, right? As one piece. But so these people are arguing climate change isn't real and so forth, which is probably a trope that's been heavily invested in by, fossil fuel sectors. When you look at that, you say, well, that's sort of really counterintuitive in terms of preparing for the future, because the climate question is really not the question you should be asking. The question you should be asking is, how do we take this economy to the next level with embedded artificial intelligence? And when you answer that question, part of the answer is you need a complete reinvention of your grid to support that, That's just one example.
I like this question. How can we take the business, organization, economy, humanity, right, to the next level, amplifying, utilizing, not replacing, but utilizing, not disqualifying, not rejecting, right? So it's about the collaboration, augmenting and co-creation, actually, because it's a different type of intelligence. What stuck with me when you said about the 350 years, so many things has happened. I have a feeling this one is, it's not I have a feeling, but I think we already know it. This one is faster. What's the major change? What is the major change is that we do need to prepare, and where do we need to think faster or be faster with?
Well, in everything, right? But the speed with which we'll be able to adapt because of technology like artificial intelligence is significant. But we talk about in AI, and in particular in AI, in tech, generally talk about scaling laws, and then we talk about hyperscaling with AI. So to give you an example, we use as a measure of compute power Moore's law as, how many transistors we get on the chips. Although, right now with the sort of GPU scale architectures and things like that, we've changed a little bit in terms of the way we measure hardware performance improvement. But since the 1960s, we've talked about Moore's law being that every 18 months to 2 years, the processing power of a chip will double and the price will either remain the same or reduce per transistor. And that's held true since 1967. But when we look at AI in that respect, AI is seeing a 5-fold increase in capability every 12 months or 10-fold every 2 years. What that means is if you look at that exponential improvement, that if you're counting from when we started with, say, OpenAI in 2022, by 2032, we're looking at 1 million times improvement in intelligence or applied intelligence. So we've never had a technology that is going to be that impactful in the world, right? And, I'm not the only one to have said this, but Eric Schmidt and others talk about this being the single most impactful technology on human society in the last 1,000 years, right? So in that environment where you have those sort of hyperscaling laws applied and applied intelligence possible, then really the brakes come off. Any problem that you can imagine will have the tools to solve in the medium term, within 10 years. Solving cancer, removing diseases, comprehensive gene therapy, longevity treatments, in the healthcare sector, solving energy production mechanisms, being able to model fusion reactors and the design of fusion reactors. So essentially in the 2040s, we'll be free energy across the planet. All of these things come from this sort of applied compute power, understanding the universe better, et cetera. So this is an extraordinary time to be alive, but you have to adapt to this, because if you're not using these new tools as they emerge, you very, very quickly fall behind, whether that's in your personal career or from a corporate perspective.
I love the lens that you bring about opportunities and possibilities, which I think we really need to have in focus, because that is why this is actually developed, built, accelerated, and of course there is the other side, the worries that people have of losing their jobs, of now, how we should operate differently, or what does it mean actually to money, abundance, salary. We are talking about universal salary or universal money coming. I don't know, what's your thoughts about that one?
There's two sides of that. One is the economic question, and the second is sort of the purpose question, right? And let me do the purpose question first. And that is when I meet someone today, when we meet someone at a networking event or similar, one of the first things we ask is, and what do you do? And the answer to that question is, this is my job. Mm-hmm. This is the set of skills that I bring to as an economic unit to the economy, right? Mm-hmm. But in, say, 15 to 20 years' time, when I ask you that question, your answer to that question won't be connected with economics at all. It'll be what you find meaningful, what you're passionate about, what you think can change the world, because the economics won't matter in that period of time if we do AI correctly. Right? And this is the point. Yeah. And if we do AI correctly, what we do is we use artificial intelligence to increase the basic level of services that everyone has on the planet, access to healthcare, access to education, access to food and shelter and so forth, so that essentially that basic layer of services is provided by autonomous infrastructure and you don't have to pay for it, right? Data access, token access, etc. If you then think about what would you need money for in that environment, the only thing you'd really need money for in the end of the day is things like experiences and travel and things that are outside of the bounds of sort of normal living and existence. And that's where a universal basic income or something like that could come in. But UBI, or universal basic income as it's sort of known, I think is designed as a fix by billionaires to keep you consuming in the system when they can't pay you a salary anymore because machines have taken over. And that sort of really doesn't make sense either, because if I'm paying you a salary, even if I'm taxing robots or taxing algorithms to pay for that, which, by the way, there is no tax on AI algorithms or robots today that would pay for UBI, so that's something we'd have to fix. But even if we had that in place, then at a certain point, you have to say, well, why are we still consuming like this? Why don't we make the use of our resources as efficient as possible and de-emphasize or deprioritize consumption? Because at this level of automation that we've got, if consumption is still a core value and economic growth is still a core value, we're effectively going to automate ourselves out of existence, because we can ramp up production of widgets at scale for free at zero marginal cost. And essentially we consume all the resources on the planet producing new iPhones, right, or whatever. And that sounds a bit crazy in a world where you could have all of your needs looked after. So I think the biggest thing with AI in terms of work is sort of really reframing the human experience itself and the role that work plays in humanity. And there's a really good futurist talks about this. His name is Dave Shapiro on the west coast of the US, and he talks about the meaning and purpose economy. And that's what I think that we're moving to, because it doesn't really make sense to have this level of automation applied into society and still be trying to do it to improve your bank account. Because, I guess the more automation you put in the system, the less useful money becomes.
It's less of a drive of efficiency, which is one lane. I totally see that. I mean, and it's actually a good thing when you think about it, right? Because so many people are disconnected and associating their identity to the role. And we are living mostly in a scarcity paradigm, right? Everybody, not everybody, but the dominant nature is still production, coming from some level of scarcity, which can be solved because it's an inner process. So some people are already living in an abundance mindset, identity being, and all of that. But that is shifting totally the whole paradigm of, right? The AI is shifting totally a game. And it brings those existential questions, so meaningful questions, like what should I do if I am provided by? So what's my meaning here in existence and purpose? So on one side, of course, will be the experiences you mentioned, because that's one part, fueling our joy and fun and happiness. But I wonder, even for myself, right, hearing you and thinking about it myself, it's like, what I do is already, I fulfill my purpose with what I'm doing. That's 4 years ago, I transitioned in my career. So I totally get that. So I've made that transition. But now imagine that I don't need to do that. Now that's an next level question. Or that I am not, that this service is taken care of by, any kind of AI agents. Or who is that?
Well, I mean, yes and no. I mean, we have to find meaning, and that's where the work is. Pope Leo just put out an encyclical on artificial intelligence. A major piece, like 45,000 words or something. Okay. And in it, he said that AI shouldn't be taking jobs from humans because work is something central to what it means to be human. And so I think there's that sort of view. One view is AI shouldn't disrupt employment. We should be able to still have the jobs that we need. But I think that's a short-term view. I think that on a long-term basis, yes, we all need to work, but we need to do work that's more meaningful, right? Not just contributing to GDP growth. Because when you have AI injected into society, then growth for the sake of growth becomes meaningless because you can produce infinite growth with AI. So growth itself as a measure becomes meaningless, and instead you need to start thinking about progress for the species. And that's applied intelligence as the core measure. So if you think about what does an economy look like when GDP growth is no longer a measure, and what does it matter when you sort of wipe out all debt, or something like that, then how does the economy function? What's the driver for the economy? And I think the driver becomes, with applied augmented intelligence, that we can be the best that we can be. We can live longer, we can eliminate disease, we can eliminate poverty, we can eliminate homelessness. Once we've done all that, what do we do then? That when you start thinking about that sort of work, it gets much more interesting.
It's a positive shift from that lens. It's a positive shift of human evolution of consciousness, because also already Maslow pyramid a bit talk about it, but there are more advanced consciousness models that basically are talking about it. It's a shift from scarcity to abundance, from serving, purpose, meaning. That aspiration of, I think, a lot of people and of leaders, when we think about, the audience as well. I think every leader wants to be the best version of themselves, wants to be inspiring and role model, and of course serve and create legacy. And now it becomes even more, I think, the forefront with that augmentation. How many years those forecasts are now? In how many years should we see that reality? Because I've heard about really very fast jumps into that are being debated about.
Well, so AGI, as sort of a milestone in this, sometime before the end of the decade, somewhere between 2028 and 2030, curing most diseases by the mid-2030s, certainly by the 2040s, because we'll be able to model new drugs, we'll be able to model gene therapy with greater accuracy and so forth. The ability to feed and house people, well, we really have the solutions to that already, even with 3D printing homes and prefabricated homes and things like that for farming, for food production, vertical farming technologies, the biggest of which is here in the UAE, in LA, the biggest global vertical farm, and then lab-grown proteins and things like that. So we really have the tools, but they're not commercially viable today. So you take commercial viability out of it because you reduce the cost dramatically with AI. Suddenly you can solve those problems. So, certainly the world of the 2040s, I think, is going to be very different from the world of today. But it will probably take until the late 2050s or 2060s for us to say, well, why do we actually need money? And what should be, the value of human existence. And I think that's a much bigger philosophical shift, because money has been, with us now since, what is it, the 9th century AD or BC rather, in terms of, like physical currency and things like that. So,
and we'll move to the digital one. It's already existing anyway.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of changes. And I'm just, soaking that in, thinking how organizations, businesses can right now start to prepare or advance the preparation for it.
Well, I like to say in respect to AI in particular that there's two types of people in the world. And you may have heard something similar before, but the first type of person is that they're using AI on a daily basis, using AI to enhance their business or augment their career. That's the first type of person. The second type of person is those that's going to be replaced by the first type of person. Right? So when I speak to startups, when I speak to established tech companies, the big tech, and I ask them about their plans, they're saying we really need people who understand AI and it can help us transform and integrate AI into the business. That's their primary concern right now. So we will, anyone that doesn't get AI or is not interested in AI, is probably going to be displaced through that process. And then, so that's the first layer. The second layer is then large-scale automation and robotics in world models, right? So this is robots working on factory floors, robots delivering packages, and those types of things. And that displaces a whole another tier of human workers. But it starts with, intelligence and knowledge-based work really in the meantime. That's what's disrupted. And it's going to be blue collar, white collar, across every sector happening simultaneously. So it's pretty disruptive. So I would say, in answer to your question, the main thing is just start using artificial intelligence every day and see how this collaborative intelligence can help you think differently. That's the first thing. The second thing is think of some really big, intractable problems that to date we don't have the science to solve, or the compute power to solve, or the energy to solve, or the economics to solve. And within 10 years, that horizon opens up where those limitations are no longer really a factor. And that gets pretty exciting.
That is interesting because we can go back to those huge goals, 10x goals that normally we want to have, or visions, right? That we don't know yet how.
Yep.
That actually drives our growth.
Yeah.
And now we can really look into more excitement about it because the likelihood of realizing them is higher, most likely, when we focus on them.
There's one other element to this, which you've hinted at, which is the question of consciousness. Because, you're talking about us going to a higher order of consciousness, the age of Aquarius, whatever you want to call this, right? But and we are seeing a lot of really interesting things happening in terms of like DMT and other psychotropic interventions and things being studied again for the first time, even though this has been a part of human history for thousands of years, plant medicine. That's happening. So there is an opening up of consciousness and awareness happening in terms of the brain and the mechanics of the brain. Quantum consciousness, a theory by Roger Penrose in terms of that our consciousness sits in the quantum fields, very, very interesting.
Yep. Quantum jumping, quantum leaping,
the bicameral mind theory, all of these changes that are happening that support that we're opening up consciousness. But the second piece of this is AI will force us to sort of think about what consciousness is. Because if AIs can approximate consciousness and simulate consciousness believably so that we think that we're speaking to another human, the Turing test, they're potentially exceeding human intelligence capabilities. And we just saw OpenAI solve a 75-year-old maths proof that humans weren't able to solve. And so, we are going to see this happening again and again where AI is solving problems that humans hadn't been able to do. And at that point, we're no longer the smartest guys in the room. So how do we measure consciousness when now we have an entity, an intelligence, that is more conscious or at least smarter than us? How do we grade other consciousnesses in that? Like we're now starting to interpret whale song and dolphin language using artificial intelligence. So we understand they're highly intelligent creatures. Yes, they don't have the same general consciousness or general intelligence that humans do, but they're certainly conscious and self-aware. Elephants, have amazing consciousness and amazing intelligence. So how are we going to grade intelligence as a result of AI being thrust upon us and showing us that we're no longer the smartest species on the planet? This is another really interesting piece that sort of forces us to examine our own intelligence and consciousness
and completely challenges leadership as well.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, the answer is actually in this. I mean, for me, the intelligence, the IQ, the smartness, that we will never be able to compete. But for me, consciousness is bigger than just an IQ, right? It has a lot about EQ as well, but it has a lot about heightened perception and it's about the ability to connect with highest energy, right? We can call it quantum. In quantum physics, you brought that. Ability to imagine, ability to influence through presence.
Yep.
So those things will, in my opinion, not be easily replaced by AI, but they can be augmented. I like those words that you say, because we all already, those who use, myself, I am in the category 1.
Good.
Based on your definitions, I do co-create as well with AI, of course. But I also noticed that my consciousness is important. So at the end is depending on what level of questions I'm asking and what my awareness is about a topic ABC. That is where the other part, which is the AI, amplify. But I also see where their bias is, which probably in a couple of years' time will be less, because obviously the thing evolves. But at the moment still, that your own human consciousness, not smartness, but your intuition as well, is guiding that co-creation process. So I think that is something which is going to remain that DNA that we need to sharpen, actually. And this is good for leadership and organizations, because too many leaders today are actually operating on intellect, on thinking, on using the prefrontal cortex and conscious mind, which we use every single day, which is important. But we also have the subconscious, firstly, right? So how do we deal with that, which actually is 95% drive behaviors and actions and everything. So that is challenging in a good direction, I think, the evolution, I would say, of leadership and humanity as well.
No, I think that's actually a really good observation, because people who are adaptable in this environment, who can use these new tools to go beyond their own capabilities, that's where it gets really interesting. So I guess we can talk about AI being collaborative intelligence.
Oh, you just named something important. Collaborative intelligence. Very nice. Very nice. Brett, you mentioned before as well, if everything goes well.
Right.
We're not going to probably go in all because there are also videos and films and podcasts and episodes about the other side of the story. But what's your sense into that? I mean, is there anything that we need to be cautious about, worried about, or what's the worst case scenario? How we could bite this?
I mean, here's the reality. These tools that we're bringing to the table, AI, quantum computing, next generation models, so forth, these are going to give us the ability to fix incredible problems like this. Longevity is one that I tackle, being able to solve aging, and eliminate this problem of old age, at least extend
How many
human
years
life.
do you want to live?
Oh, I'd be happy with 200, I think. We'll see when I get
I haven't
past
set that goal yet. I think you need to start doing it.
We'll see. I mean, I would like to live probably for a few decades, out off-world, like, live maybe on a Mars colony or something, exploring the solar system. That'd be really cool. So, if I can live healthily till the middle of next decade, then after that, theoretically, I should be able to start de-aging myself, and so it's theoretically possible. But we got off the track of your
no
your
problem.
question,
That was
so.
a curiosity question. Yeah. No, we were talking about the dark side.
Yeah, but the dark side is that all of those tools that we can bring to bear in respect to enhancing and augmenting humanity, those same tools could be used for criminal activities, by bad state actors, by actors who have less than good intentions. So we do have to put in guardrails. We need ethics embedded in AI. We need regulatory arbitrage and guardrail that's consistent around the world. And we're a long way from that. This sort of self-regulation by technology companies is a big problem for us, because, there's not many of those tech companies who are really doing that ethically. I would say there are some that are better than others. But the second piece of this is we need, coordinated government action around the globe to insist that AI, doesn't, for example, AI shouldn't be making decisions in warfare about which humans to kill, right? We shouldn't have autonomous weaponry capable of doing that. When it comes to solving diseases and gene therapy, there needs to be guidelines in respect to that. Criminal justice, all of those things need, strong ethical guidelines. Autonomous treatment in a healthcare setting, education of our kids, all of that needs ethical guidelines for the ethical use of artificial intelligence. And we don't have any of that today. And part of the problem, the reason we don't have, is it's very hard for humans to quantify or qualify ethics. Right?
So we need now AI to create the ethical codes?
Well, I think that's probably a good way. And one of the reasons that it could be actually useful is that the foundation models we have, this is one thing that gives me hope, is most of the models we have, with the exception maybe of Grok from XAI, which has been trained on, very specifically on right-wing talking points and language. But all the other models, and even Grok, to be honest, tends to be, fit the bell curve of human opinion. Right? Reversion to the mean, as Warren Buffett would call it. But it essentially means that if you take all of this learning from all of humanity and you put it in an LLM or a model, you're going to get a moderate, midstream sort of assessment. You're not going to get far left or far right political views and so forth. You're not going to get extreme economic views. You're going to get something which is applicable to the most humans on the planet that it can be, which tends to be something more centrist. And so that's the thing that sort of gives me some hope, is that these models by nature tend to be more centrist and more focused on the average human than on these more extreme views. So that's one area where I would say that over time we're probably going to find that AI is, in terms of self-governance, is going to be maybe even more effective than humans at governing AI, which is sort of interesting concept. But
yeah. Understandable, and at the same time it feels like really, really needed.
Yeah.
Sooner than later, right? Because it can get out of hands and out of control.
Yeah.
Lastly, Bert, I'm thinking about leaders in organizations, because of course there are business owners listening to us and business owners or leaders in our corporations, that's basically. That means the situation of a business owner will be different than an executive or leader in a corporation. I want to shortly zoom here. Apart from, of course, getting to know the tools, AIs, and implementing their organizational scale, business scale. Now, as an individual, how big is this risk of, am I going to lose my job in the next 1 or 2 years' time? And what I should be doing now if that risk exists?
It's interesting. I would say 12 months ago, many people were arguing it's not real. If you look at history, every time we've developed new technologies, yes, some jobs have been displaced, but new jobs have been created. But I don't know whether you saw that Eric Schmidt and a bunch of other tech leaders have been doing commencement speeches this week and being booed by the graduating students when they talk about artificial intelligence, because entry-level graduate jobs are at their lowest point in the last 40 years right now because of artificial intelligence. And so we're already seeing technology displacement at that level. We are seeing large tech companies and even banks and others laying off tens of thousands of people in order to buy compute power, right? In order to buy tokens for AI, to build their data centers and so forth. So this is real. There is going to be technology displacement of workers at various levels. It's going to be sporadic. It's going to be different impact in different markets. You are going to have at the same time very aggressive approaches in the United States for replacing people with algorithms and agents. And at the same time, you're going to have the opposite, right, within certain places in the United States. China has already said it's illegal to replace a human worker with AI, right, in the workforce. And it's the first economy that has done that. The Pope has obviously weighed into this, so the European Council is probably tending more towards protecting human workers as well. But that doesn't really solve the problem, because all that will happen is that tech will spin out into companies that are disruptive and disrupt traditional players as well. So you can't really stop this technology cycle from happening.
You can't control that, right?
350 years, a number of times that we've successfully stopped it at zero. So instead, what you need to start thinking about is how to transition the economy to this new state. What does it look like? What sort of jobs are going to be needed? How do we retrain people so their skills are fit for purpose? What are the new industries that are going to be created by these technologies? And how do we transition people as rapidly as possible? So I think that needs to be more of the focus. And from an individual leader's perspective, I think you need to start saying, all right, if I want to guarantee that people have a job, then what I need to do right now is invest in those people so that they are ready for the next type of job that this company needs, and retrain them and give them the tools to do that, rather than just saying, all right, well, let's bring in consultants and work out how we replace all these humans with AI. That's, a less moral way to approach it. There's certainly companies that will be doing that as well. So I think as a leader, embracing this, saying it's going to happen. How do I bring my team along? Having that open conversation with the team. I saw a great example of this was SCB, Siam Commercial Bank in Thailand recently. The CEO was talking to the team about digitization of the bank. And he said, our intent is to become a digital bank. Our intent is to, over time, have less and less human operations for the bank, less branches and so forth, and really, improve the capability of the digital experience. Our customers have all of their needs whenever they need the bank. And if if those of you in the audience today are thinking how this affects your job and where you're going to be in the future, don't worry. We will invest in you and retrain you and give you the skills so you can move into data science or labeling for our models or whatever it might be to support this process. Yeah. And those of you that don't like this and say this is not what I signed up for, don't worry. We'll find you a job outside of the organization. And it was a really interesting way of articulating, but at least I think it's those sort of conversations that leaders need to have in the workplace today.
Yeah, absolutely. So, welcoming that change and embracing that it is happening with or without you, I think that's the one thing every leader from this conversation had to take. And I think reflect on where am I now? That's the second question. Where am I now with this whole embracing that AI, that technology, that changes for myself, for my organization, for my team, for my business, embedding that in a reflection with a team, with other experts, most likely to staying, I guess, as well, up to speed, up to date of what are the latest changes, because the thing is that changes all the time. So having in your network or having a company, having an advisor, depending on the size of the company, but you do need mentors, experts in that realm that can actually suggest as well, where are we at that state and what in your business or in your organization would now be applicable. So I think those are things that comes to me, and the beautiful vision that you painted forward, right? How many years we can aspire to live. So I'm going to start to set my intentions. I have not really thought about that one yet, as well as, the positive side of the impact and solving the problems that have been impossible to solve before, serving humanity. And evolving consciousness, so many beautiful things.
No, the evolution of consciousness is certainly super interesting, and we may learn more about consciousness in the next couple of decades than we have over the last 1,000 years. So it could be pretty interesting. But I think the sky's the limit. I'm an optimist. I'm a techno optimist, and I think that this is going to open up all crazy new capabilities and fields for us. But the more that you resist these change and the more you talk about we need traditional values and things like this, the more it's going to be uncomfortable for you. So that's the challenge in a period of time where things are changing faster than ever before.
Collaborative intelligence. That's the keyword. Collaborative intelligence. And also not replacing humans, but working with. I think that's changing the narrative. Thank you, Brett, for being here. You are accessible, or if people want to connect with you, maybe invite you for a keynote speech or advice. What's the best way?
You can check out brettking.com, Brett with 2 T's, which is my personal website. Of course, I'm on all the socials. LinkedIn is one place that a lot of people can find me. On YouTube. Check out my podcast, Breaking Banks, on Provoke Media, and also The Futurists, which is the #1 futurist podcast in the world. And I've got a new book coming out in November, which is called Bank 5.0. It's part of my series of the future of banking. And also, if you wouldn't mind checking out my new AI healthcare startup called LumaBrush, which we have developed an AI-based toothbrush that can detect cavities at home. So
many angles, so... Interest is diversified for you. You have really grown a lot in this diversity. Thank you very much, Brett. It was a pleasurable conversation. I learned a lot. And the 350 with 0 impact. That'll be memorable. Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Good. You're welcome.
And thank you as well for listeners. And I hope that as me, you're taking away a lot. And it leave you with reflection of where you are today and where you need to recalibrate, shift you, your team, your organization, so that you thrive in this exponential era and solve those impossible and unattainable problems and challenges and goals that you had before, and now make them really your reality. So see you next time.